So we're gonna dive right into scripture again. We've got some interesting things going on with the space for our brewery. So we really need you to send some positive vibes our way. We're hopeful that's going to work out. And with that being said, we're gonna dive right in here. We've been walking through the Gospel of Jesus. Before that, we did the Gospel of Thomas, which is an uncanonized gospel of the sayings of Jesus. And before that, we walked through Mark. So we've been on kind of a Jesus kick for like 3 years. So as we wrap this up, be prepared because we're going to be doing an Old Testament study as soon as we get done with this. We're going to be walking through some of the key passages in the Old Testament that people often misuse to abuse other people. So I'm actually really excited about that. So with that being said, let's get started. It says this. It says, the Pharisees gather around him, along with some of the scholars who had come from Jerusalem, when they noticed some of his disciples eating their meal with defiled hands. That is to say, without washing their hands. You see, the Pharisees and the Jews never eat without first washing their hands in a particular way, also observing the traditions of the elders. And they won't eat when they get back from the marketplace without washing again. And there are many other traditions they cherish, such as the washing of cups and jugs and kettles. The Pharisees and the scholars start questioning him. Why don't your disciples live up to the tradition of the elders instead of eating bread with defiled hands? Listen to me, all of you, and try to understand what goes into you can't defile you. What comes out of you can. If anyone here has 2 good ears, use them. Why do you wash the outside of the cup? Don't you understand that the one who made the inside also made the outside? So take a couple minutes, kind of cluster together and talk about that scripture. It's going to be on the screen here, and then we'll come back and share those thoughts with one another in just a moment. All right, so who wants to share some observations about today's text? Yes, Sarah.
So I just think, I got from it that there was a bit of you're following the letter of the law rather than the spirit of the law. You forgot why we do these traditions, but you're still doing them and you're judging people for not doing them, even if you're doing them for the wrong reasons.
Gotcha. Good stuff. And that's pretty close to how it's supposed to be taken. It's pretty cut and dry this week. But what else did you guys talk about? Any more? Going once. Going twice. All right, here we go. So Jesus is basically poo-pooing on religiosity. And he's criticizing rituals and washing these vessels. And it's kind of relevant for today because spirituality is on the decline in the developed world, especially in Europe, especially in America. And as a pastor, oddly enough, I kind of think this is a good thing. I'm excited about it because our minds are so often so heavenly and spiritually focused that they're no earthly good. And in Santa Cruz, this is not exclusive to Christianity, by the way. Talks of crystals and vibrations and listening to the universe, all of that stuff, it sounds mystical, but all too often it's all we focus on, and it can be just as ridiculous as the concept of thoughts and prayers. Let me give you an example. Marianne Williamson said this week, yeah, please don't laugh, because I'll laugh. Marianne Williamson said this week, as she exited the presidential race, that love will prevail as it always has. Now, I'm a fan of the phrase, love wins, in that if we wield nonviolent subversion and display compassion, it will ultimately win. But this, of course, is contingent upon our collective willingness to actually take action. The truth of the matter is that simply believing that love is a supernatural force that will and has always win is not historically accurate, for one, and it's kind of absurd. Love did not prevail when Trump won the election. Love has not prevailed when kids are locked in cages. Love has not prevailed when we have betrayed the biosphere. And love has not prevailed when the upper classes continue to crush the lower class and exploit the environment for personal gain. Now, as a result of unhinged logic masquerading as spirituality in this country, young people are fleeing churches, they're fleeing religion, And there's a multitude of reasons for this, but the themes that are consistently presented to me are that these worship spaces, these creeds, these rituals, and the language of church or religion is often irrelevant or incredibly traumatic to people. Many people have been scarred by the church. They've been scarred by religion, and ancient symbols, robed attire, church speak, religious speak, reminds them of their past spiritual wounds or incites negative impressions that people have that are often associated with evangelical belief, even if these artifacts are located in liberal houses of spirituality. Now, take my wife, Allie, for example. I'm not sure if I've shared this story here or not. It is in my book, but we met on a dating app in 2016. And I had been divorced, so I was not interested at all in getting married again. And Allie had no intention of getting married whatsoever or seeking a lifelong commitment. And neither one of us, coincidentally, were having a good time dating online. We did not have positive results in our cyber quest for companionship. We both were running out of steam. And one day I noticed this brunette online. And I thought, well, she's beautiful. I'll give it one last shot. I'll reach out. I was even more excited that she was located in the same city I was. And really excited, I took the first awkward steps in saying hello, and we instantly hit it off. We shared a lot of the same values, and though we knew quite a bit about one another after a few days of talking, I refused to tell her what I did for a living. Now, why the secrecy? I kept my role as a reverend under wraps because transparency about my career as a minister had failed miserably in past relationships, both romantic and in friendships. You have to remember that because of evangelical dominance in America, most people are still quite oblivious in regards to the existence of progressive Christianity. Living in Santa Cruz and trying to make friends or find a lover in your 30s is already difficult enough. More so if people know that you are a minister in a largely post-religious community. And all throughout the Bay Area, this is the norm, right? Many residents hate religion, probably for all the right reasons. So the moment people discover that you, or me, is a person of the cloth, one of two inevitabilities always occur. They either distance themselves from you because they paint you with the same brush as Joel Osteen, or maybe even Donald Trump, or they will refrain from using four-letter adjectives in your presence or drinking beer around you in an attempt to make you comfortable because they think you're super uptight. And neither one of those frequent occurrences appeal to me, especially assuming that I'm lame just because I'm a pastor. Thus, I carry this temporarily secretive policy regarding my calling into the realm of online dating. In fact, side note, this just happened. This is not in my book. It happened this week. I was at the bar a few nights ago, and there's a little dive bar right down the road from my house. It's an awesome scene for me because it's 5 minutes away. And since we're currently in what I like to call the annual media dead zone, meaning nothing new is on TV that interests me until March. I don't know if y'all are in that same boat. Nothing is on TV. I've been going there to play pool once a week or so. And I met this guy, and he asked me what I did for a living. And I said, well, I'm a pastor, but I always I'm a pastor, but I'm a Christian, but. And at first, he was extremely uncomfortable, right? But I went through all the ways our church is different. We're open and affirming LGBTQ. We believe in evolution. We don't believe that scripture is, all literal. We drink beer at church. We focus on ethics and not spirituality. And in the most Santa Cruz way possible, he goes, bruh, that is the weirdest shit I have ever heard. And he was definitely still concerned, even though I gave him the rundown. And likewise, it certainly concerned Allie, too, with the secrecy, right? Because the secrecy was just as concerning for her. I think that she sincerely thought that I was a drug dealer because she would text me questions about my job, and I would simply respond that I could not disclose that information at this point in time. So I think she either thought I was a drug dealer or a mercenary. I was hoping that it would come across as mysterious, but I'm quite sure it came across as Breaking Bad. But I digress. After a few days of chatting nonstop online, even though she was probably still a little concerned about what I did for a living, we decided to meet in person. And there was a local pub not too far away from the church facility that we used to own. And I thought it was, just a funny coincidence that I noticed that she was diametrically opposed to religion in her description of herself. And we met at this place called The Parish. So you guys probably know the place. But I just thought it was funny. So I walk into the bar, I see Allie. We begin to kind of have the first bits of conversation, and it was going very well, but the problem was there was no seating in the establishment whatsoever. There was not one seat available. But luckily there was another restaurant a few blocks away, but it didn't make a lot of sense for both of us to try and tackle all that is the problem of Mission Street. So I offered to escort her in my car and take her there. We'd ride together. So she agreed, and we went outside. I opened the passenger door for her of my white Toyota Prius, which she did not hesitate to mock right away. I don't know why there's such hate around Priuses, but she made fun of it. And once I went around, kind of laughed that off, and I got on the driver's side, I buckled my seatbelt, and I kind of looked over at her because she was no longer laughing, and I noticed that her once cheerful expression had noticeably turned to deep concern. She was fixated on the multiple crucifix necklaces I had adorned my rearview mirror with. And anyone could have seen that she was no longer curious with my occupation or about what I did for a living, but rather my religion. Side note, people always buy me crosses, and so you don't have to buy them. I have plenty. I don't know why people do. Even to this day, and it's weird because I kind of make it public that I think the cross is a destructive symbol. I think it's been used to oppress people throughout church history. But I appreciate the thought, so I still kind of hold on to them. I don't wear them, and at the time, the easiest place for me to display them for friends that gave them to me but not wear them was in my rearview mirror. So back to the story. There's Allie, like mortified, looking at these crosses. And she goes, "Oh no, you're not religious, are you?" She gagged and spoke at the same time. It was amazing. So I, being the comedic genius I am, said, "Hell no, but I am a pastor." And I hope that would help her calm down a little bit with this new knowledge. And she was not amused. She has still not realized how hilarious I am. I've been waiting for 3 years in this relationship. So one day she's gonna make that discovery. I'll let y'all know when that happens. She'll figure it out. See, listen to all the laughs, Allie. Anyway. So I began to explain, again, how much my beliefs differed from what she knew Christianity to be. I ran through the entire gambit of the progressive Christian checklist. Once again, open and affirming, anti-war, pro-racial reconciliation, pro-gun control, pro-feminism, pro-socialism, anti-Republican. That's what our church is. You can calm down. You get the picture. And at first, just like the guy at the bar a few nights ago, she wasn't entirely convinced that my faith was genuinely any different than what she had experienced in her past. She firmly explained that she was agnostic and had no desire whatsoever to ever convert. After I told her that I cared much more about her values than about her spiritual beliefs, she told me about her prior experience with the Christian faith and with the church. You see, Allie had grown up attending a conservative Lutheran church. Not only had church bored her to tears, but she and her sisters had experienced some pretty gnarly trauma in that church when she was growing up. They were told on multiple occasions that they were going to hell for a variety of reasons. Circumstances like not attending church on a weekly basis, or her sister not agreeing to play piano for the congregation on Sunday mornings, had assured her and her entire family of a fiery furnace for all of eternity. And my seemingly harmless charm, made of wood and leather, had shaken our entire evening. The cross had transported Allie back to an inner place of fear, and at the time there was nothing that could alter her perception about these religious symbols. Imagine what it would have been like for her to walk into a sanctuary at this stage of our relationship. I don't need to use much of my creative skills to visualize that hypothetical scenario because I had experienced many similar conversations with visitors to our old church building. You see, when our church owned a traditional worship space, it didn't matter how progressive our message was. It didn't matter what we taught. It didn't matter how different we were. It didn't matter that we gave most of our money to charity. Actually, we gave 100% of our money to charity at the time. Because young people would inevitably tell me that though they adored our service, they were triggered by sitting in a pew in a building with giant crosses on its exterior. They could not remain calm knowing that they were seated under a steeple. They would often tell me that even though our service was refreshing, that they could not enjoy it because they couldn't feel safe in our worship facility. And so it is with traditionalism in its entirety, with robes, stained glass, steeples, crosses, pews, and hymnals, despite their original message and or intent, and regardless of our own positive ambitions. These temples, these decorations, these artifacts and symbols have been banners historically used to rally Christians in their march of oppression. And many may disagree with me, but it's my opinion that there is absolutely nothing that we can do to reclaim these artifacts, these methods, and these symbols of antiquity. There is no remedy that can alter the trauma experienced by the masses who have fled our faith and have seen them used with negative intent. But I think what today's verse points out is that people of faith have often missed the point in regards to worship and spirituality. We can seek inspiration that is used to uphold the timeless traditions found in the New Testament that Jesus actually taught us to cling to, the traditions of love, the traditions of justice, the traditions of peace. We can hold on to those things, and we can let go of all of the other baggage and repackage church in a way that focuses on ethics rather than spiritual nonsense. The book of James puts it this way: religion that is pure and undefiled before God is this, to care for orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the world. My point today is that the current success of the cathedral in church history, and now even the megachurch, is ultimately going to be short-lived because people are waking up to how ridiculous what their theology is, being presented on Sunday morning. They're realizing it. It's still a cathedral. They just dressed it up in an auditorium with a booming sound system, and they got a guy with skinny jeans, a faux hawk, and an iPad instead preaching up front. You see, the dichotomy between these auditoriums and cathedrals is minute. Both were built under the theological premise that God desires to reside in large, complex structures. Both have spent ungodly amounts of wealth to construct. Both require large numbers of congregants to sustain, and both focus much of their clergy's attention in creating a weekly production rather than producing disciples. Both are properties that are a pain in the ass to maintain, trust me from experience. And lastly, the world is growing sick of both venues because these halls of worship feel like empty tombs to so many people. And I gotta say, I think they should. So when people ask me after articles like this week, why did you sell your church building? Or why did you sell your church? What I tell them is this: we didn't sell the church. We sold our building. The church is a movement for justice in a broken world, and it's not for sale. We should have little desire to hold on to temples that can be repurposed or resourced to build something that is new and that's innovative and that's taking care of the poor and the broken and the marginalized. I think that many radical sages of the text believe that God would be disgusted with the megachurch and with temples and the cathedrals, and one simply needs to look to the metaphors found in the scripture to accept this axiom. Think about it. The Tower of Babel was destroyed. The temple of God, the tables of the temple of God were flipped. The temple veil was torn. We keep building more elaborate and expensive religious facilities, and God keeps tearing that shit down. It's as if God is saying that our religious spaces and relics have never been the point. I dare say that if Jesus were here today, I truly believe that this passionate rabbi would be critical of both settings. After all, it's not like God of Scripture had much appreciation for grand architecture. I'm reminded of this truth displayed in a section of sacred text found in Isaiah. It says this: bringing offerings is futile. Incense is an abomination to me. This is in the Bible, y'all. New moon and Sabbath celebrations and calling of convocation. I cannot endure your solemn assemblies with iniquity, your new moon and your appointed festivals. My soul hates them. They have become a burden to me. I am weary of bearing them. When you stretch out your hand, I will hide my eyes from you, even though you make many prayers. I will not listen. Your hands are full of blood of the oppressed. Wash yourselves. Make yourselves clean. Remove the evil of your doings from before my eyes. Cease to do evil. Learn to do good. Seek justice, rescue the marginalized, defend the orphan, plead for the widow. That's in the Bible, y'all. I'm going to end this dissertation with a question that has reshaped my ministry for well over a decade. What if God desires partners in creating heaven here on earth and despises worship that creates an hour-long spectacle that ultimately uses heaven as a tool for mass manipulation? What does that mean for those who claim to follow Christ, and what does it mean in regards to how we conduct our worship services today? So take a couple minutes, talk amongst yourselves. We'll come back and share those thoughts in just a moment. All right. So what did you all talk about? Yep. Good stuff. Good stuff. What else? Yes.
I was telling them about, because I'm not, okay, the first time I went to this church, it was when you all were in the old building, and I was there for about half of the service and had an example of it. And part of that was because I had never been to a Protestant service other than a youth group service that my cousin brought me to, where they would pass out magazines to the kids. I brought one home, and it has an article about ex-gay therapy. And I didn't really even look at the magazine, but my mother read it and told me I wasn't allowed to go to that church. And and so it's just a really complicated situation. Like, I mean, I have like a complicated nature with religion in the first place for various reasons, but like I was also afraid because it was the Protestant church.
Didn't know what we were going to do.
Exactly.
Yeah, I feel you. I heard that story quite a bit, and it was one of the reasons that we started thinking about like different approaches. And no matter what kind of approach we had, we got rid of the pews, right, Ms. Betty? And that was hard, but we got rid of the pews and we did these things. And though it was an improvement, people would say it's just this building. This building has memories attached to it that are painful. So part of the reason we let it go. This week, what stood out to me is that this season that America is in is begging for the church to wake up. Like war with Iran is on our doorstep. Australia is ablaze. Puerto Rico is being rocked by earth-shattering quakes. And it's heartbreaking. And what is more concerning is the level of apathy that I've witnessed from people of faith. And it all comes from religious dogma that likely would have infuriated Christ. And that dogma is this: why should we worry about what happens in this world? This life is temporary, and this plane of existence is simply a gateway. Heaven everlasting is our reward. Why should we worry about what's going on earth? Hackatoo. That's what they sound like. To me, anyway. And you know what? I hope that's true, y'all. I hope there is heaven after this life. But since I can't prove that heaven exists, and neither can anyone in this room, neither can any one of us here, can we stop focusing on the afterlife in the church and start mending the earth and society with our lives, please? I am exhausted with pastors saying that tragedies are somehow signs of the end times. And they're like hopeful for it because they think heaven is coming when hell is erupting all around us. War, pollution, poverty, disease, corruption, cruelty, bigotry, and classism are not signs of the end times. They are beacons of humanity's indifference. And the saddest reality about the Western church is that we only care about these cathedrals because they remind us that one day we'll be comforted when the lights go out. What if we're wrong? Have you thought about that? What if this life is all we have? What if this home is all we have? I think the church needs to consider this. And since we sold our building, many older white Christians specifically that are on the evangelical spectrum have talked about how sad it is that we're no longer a church. I hear it all the time from folks that go to more conservative churches in the area. Bro, we're still a church. We just don't have a building anymore tying us down. If anything, this transition is a divine upgrade because there's beer at this one. Just saying. Why is it that we always rally around crumbling artifacts of the past and traditions? Think about it. More money was donated to Notre Dame than was raised for the Australian wildfires. 500 million animals died. It's getting closer to 1 billion animals died in Australia. And Australia, by the way, is not some tiny little island. It's almost as big as America. It's very close to the same size. And I'm trying to remember how many acres burned, but it was like 67 million acres or something insane. I know that it's the size of Belgium is destroyed in Australia. Why is it that this cathedral raised more money than restoring this landscape? Why is it that more money was raised to restore Notre Dame than was raised for Flint, Michigan, which, by the way, still does not have clean water? Why is it that more money was raised for Notre Dame than was raised for Puerto Rico, that is constantly experiencing disaster after disaster? Why are we so concerned with preserving these institutions that tell us that we're sinners and that we're filthy and we're unworthy of love, and that proclaim with unreserved certainty that there is life after death, but to the point that they have become deaf to the cries of all that is dying around us? Friends and family of all faiths and identities, I think it's time to realize that this earth is our cathedral, and all things living are its parishioners. And if the church can realize how sacred and how sensitive the gift of life is, how holy life is, all of it in its entirety, and if we can witness the spark of the divine that dwells in the eyes of our neighbors, and not just humanity, but the animals and the plants, the ecosystem that surrounds us, if we can do that, I think we might just be able to glimpse the kind of heaven that Jesus beckoned us to build. Until next week, may the peace of the Lord Christ go with you wherever it may send you. May it guide you through the wilderness and protect you through the storms. May it bring you home rejoicing at the wonders that it shows you, and may it bring you home rejoicing once again into our doors. Grace and peace to you.